Welcome to the last of the New Year webinar series. Tonight, we're diving into one of the biggest questions in fitness, being why does the same workout strategy transform one person but then burn out another? This all-important concept that we focus on at the DNA Company is that of bioindividuality. We apply this concept to diet strategies and detox strategies, gut health strategies, you name it. So, of course, we apply it to how you exercise as well. And here to discuss this topic with me is someone who I believe has worked out a time or two in her life, a former competitive bodybuilder and now functional genomics practitioner, the jacked and powerful Felicia Bruno. Welcome.
Thank you, Justin. I'm excited to be here. Yes, I have worked out a time or two. I have put in my time in the gym, many gyms and multiple gyms. I have been to the fancy ones, the sweaty ones, the dirty ones, and I love them all. Gonna be honest with you. That's my happy place. That's where I find my joy.
Yeah, the dirty ones are sometimes the best ones because they've got the heaviest dumbbells.
They actually do. That's where the old school equipment, the ones that's got usually dirt and sweat and rust. I do not discriminate. I love them.
Absolutely. So before we dive into some of the genetic considerations and the things that we like to talk about relative to fitness, you want to go ahead and tackle the poll and see why everybody's here tonight?
I do. So if the powers to be could show me the poll so I could read it. Perfect. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Um, so the questions were what your genes tell you about and how to exercise. The first one was, what is your biggest challenge with exercise? And 40% of you said staying consistent. That's a biggie. 15% say low energy. And recovering after workout, 9%. And 35% not knowing what type of exercise is best. I think that's probably staying. I agree with both of these, staying consistent and not knowing what type of exercise. I get that the most from people that come up and like, well, how do I train my biceps or how do I train, not knowing, and especially being in a gym, it could be very intimidating, especially to a lot of women of what does that machine do? And I think we've all been in the gym and seen some people like, I don't know what they're doing on the machine. So I get it. All right. Number two, which type of workout feels best for you? 42% strength training, which I love that answer. That's a good answer. 6% cardio, 8% HIIT training, and 23 yoga and pilates are low impact. And 22% are like, I'm not really sure what type feels best. So we're going to answer that. I love that. Number three, have you ever felt like exercise affects you differently than your friends? Okay, Justin, when this comes to like girls, every time, because you've got girls going, well, all she does is run and she looks amazing. And you got the next one like, well, all she does is yoga and all that. So this is a really good one. 28% say yes all the time. I do feel, like exercise affects me differently. 45% said sometimes. 12% said rarely, and 15%, I love these people that say never. I love that because that means to me that you're pretty confident. Like, you know what? I know what I'm doing and it doesn't bother me. So I appreciate that answer. Last, number four, what's your top fitness goal for the new year? 32% say lose weight. Yeah. 42% say build muscle. I love this. Building muscle is so important. I love that. 6% say improve energy. 3% say improve mental health. Okay. 17% say stay consistent. So that's pretty much across the board. What is your top fitness goal, Justin, this year? If you don't mind me asking real quick. I know we weren't supposed to answer these, but be
There's this
honest.
concept. I'm really obsessed with this whole idea of there's a book called The Science of Getting Rich, and he talks about this whole chapter where they call it the advancing man. And this could be applied to anybody, right? You don't have to be a man for this, but the whole idea is that in order to advance, you have to fill more than your current place. And if nobody quite filled their current place, there would be a going backward of all things in society. So that's something that I have as kind of a general thing that I look at for fitness, for finance, for everything that I do. I'm trying to just be the advancing man. So every metric of fitness that I look at, I'm trying to fill more than my current place. The current version of me can do X amount of cardio and can, deadlift X amount. The advancing man is the one who can fill more than that current place. So that's an applicable thing across the board. I'm trying to be that little 1% better in each and every aspect of who I am as a man. And that's my philosophical answer for you. Always trying to be better, because otherwise there's no stagnation in the universe. You're either progressing or you're getting worse. But I don't think that there's such a thing as staying where you are.
I agree. I agree. That's a good answer too. All right. The last question we had was, do you feel your recovery time after workouts is longer than it should be? So do you feel like after you work out, do you feel like, oh my gosh, it's going to take me 3 days to recover? Or do you recover really quickly? Like the next day, you're like, yeah, I feel pretty good. So 26% of you said yes. I feel like recovery time after workouts is longer than it should be. 22% said no. And 35% said sometimes. I think this comes into, what is it that we did for the workout? What did that look like? How is the duration, and what did it look like? So sometimes you're like, I don't know. Did I feel, maybe you don't know exactly what you did, the exertion part of it to get there. And 17% of us said, we're unsure. I don't know. So that's the poll. But I think across the board, I love the answers, and we can talk about this in every aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. And shout out to Sue in the comments, who says she likes the that whole advancement concept. And I think that's what everybody's after, right? Advancement in one realm or another. I just like to apply it across the board, because the results that you're looking for is really on the other side of the work that you're not currently doing, right? So if you can add in these elements and kind of tailor your exercise regimen to what your genetic blueprint suggests, you're going to start advancing across all these realms. So with that said, I would say we should go ahead and dive into some of these genes, because there is no one fitness gene, right? I mean, there's several primary movers that influence appetite and energy fueling, like the FTO gene. There's motivation and reward, so like the BDNF gene and the DRD2 gene, that dopamine pathway. There's stress tolerance and response to things like high intensity interval training. The COMT gene is pretty relevant there. And even exercise timing relative to circadian rhythm, right? So even clock and the CRY1 gene are really of relevance here. Felicia, I mean, you've done so much good work with diet plans and things. What is your application here for the FTO gene? Maybe explain to people a little bit about what it is and how it helps to determine, appetite, energy use, and exercise fueling as well.
The FTO gene is going to tell us if we're prone to obesity. So how does that look? And it's also going to be like, okay, well, do I have when I look at a client with this, I'm seeing what gene they carry, and do they have higher cues in like eating, or do they feel like after they've done something, then they can reward themselves with food? Do they have that sensation? So it plays a big role of how I'm going to structure my program around them. And when I structure it around, is it, eating time or morning or night, that all plays a big role too. So every little thing comes into play. For me, and I will be honest, I do carry that gene, and that's one thing I want to say about all these genes, is it doesn't predestine your destiny. Just because I carry it doesn't mean that I'm going to have it. Means I could, but I really stress to my clients, because you have these genes, it doesn't predestine you. It's to help us know, oh, okay, that's why this happens, or that's what that happens, and help us to better ourselves. So I just always put that out there first and foremost. It's not the end of the end. It's actually oh, okay, I can work with this better. So the FTO gene, that's where I start, and helps me look at, again, where do they place food, and how, enjoyment do they get out of that reward?
Yeah, and I think also for that post-workout carbohydrate craving that a lot of people get, when you have this dysregulation in the FTO gene, I think that that amplifies that a little bit. And if you're new to these webinars, I'll briefly just say what the FTO gene is. There's this thing called the gut-brain axis, right? So there's this bidirectional circuit, and the brain communicates with the gut, and the gut communicates back to the brain, and it really influences things like ghrelin and leptin signaling in the body. So there's literally a signal going from the gut to the brain when you start chewing down food that says, okay, we're all set. We don't need any more calories. Dysregulation in that FTO gene means that that signal is way slower, right? So you're going to be one of these people that might crash out a little bit quicker during the workout. Your body craves food. And when you're done training, you're likely going to be the one that wants to run right to the big plate of pasta. And it's just that thing that you need to kind of regulate within your genes. There's another one called MC4R that's pretty relative to that pathway as well. And speaking of things like motivation and your capacity to push through a workout, the dopamine and the BDNF pathway are pretty relevant there as well. You know, dopamine is really relevant because it is that pleasure and reward circuitry in the brain. And the brain doesn't know the difference between pleasure or reward. So let's say you were to set up an eating strategy surrounding your workouts, that reward thing is going to be there because you want to feel like you earned those calories, those carbohydrates, whatever it is. But the brain doesn't know if you earned it or if you're just using it as pleasure, and that's how you're getting your dopamine. So if you're what we call a high binder of dopamine, then you're going to be a lot more likely to be someone who uses food as a reward or a pleasure mechanism. And my recommendation is to use it as a reward. Don't just wake up and just assume that you deserve all of these calories and carbohydrates and things. Earn it, right? Push yourself in a workout first and then use it as post-workout refueling. There's going to be a lot less blood sugar variability and things like that. The BDNF gene is interesting because it really regulates how rewarding exercise can feel. Part of the benefit of exercise is it amplifies BDNF, right? When you get a workout in, it boosts your BDNF. And that's brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and it's really relevant for neuroplasticity. It's great for the health of the brain. And some of us, myself included, are just genetically dysregulated for the BDNF gene. And when you're low efficiency, it means that exercise is going to feel that little bit harder mentally. And high efficiency means it's easier to be consistent there as well. So if you're low for BDNF, I mean, exercise is going to amplify it, but you may also want to use certain nutritive ingredients like coffee fruit extract or do some breath work before you train. These things can help boost the BDNF and make it so that you have better exercise endurance as well. So BDNF is really important there. In that same pathway, there's something called COMT, which is really of relevance for like stress tolerance and for the dopamine and noradrenaline pathway as well. Do you want to touch a little bit on COMT and what it does in the body?
It's how you break down endorphins and dopamine. I think it's really important. I was going to say on the BDNF, if you have low, um, I suggest to my clients that maybe a morning workout works well because it creates the endorphins. It kind of gets you going. But if it's higher, it's suboptimal, then you're pretty good. You know, you don't struggle as much trying to get to the gym, or you find it more rewarding, or you're in a better place. Not across the board with everybody, but in general. So I love morning if you have suboptimal BDNF to regulate endorphins. That's where I go with that. Um, the COMT gene, helps you motivate on motivation and stress. So depending on where you sit there, I think it has a lot to do with that. Are you motivated, or are you going to be stressed out about it? And that has a lot to do with, and you go back into after that recovery. So how, if you stress out, then recovery has a lot to do with that. So I think the COMT gene is important. Also, I look at that very good too.
Yeah, it makes sense. And while we're on the topic of circadian rhythm, because you mentioned like timing your workouts in different ways, I've always been a big fan of understanding this catabolic and anabolic balance in the body. Now, we do have genes like clock and cry1, and those are really primary regulators of circadian rhythm. The thing to remember here is that we have this diurnal rhythm, right? We're not nocturnal beings, we're diurnal beings. So we're supposed to be awake and alive during the day, and then we're supposed to shut it down at night. And there's these things that are regulating this with cortisol and melatonin and serotonin. And when we time catabolic workouts in the morning, it does kind of honor that rhythm, right? Because your cortisol is supposed to spike first thing in the morning. Around 6 a.m. is when typically it spikes, and that creates this blood sugar release from your liver, and that's what gets you up and gets you moving. About 12 hours after that, cortisol is supposed to go down and go down all throughout the day, reaching its lowest point 12 hours after you got up. And that low point is what gives rise to that melatonin, and that's what allows you to transition into sleep and parasympathetic time. So, what I do is I like to do catabolic movement in the morning to honor that because my body's supposed to be stressed right there. And then later, if I'm going to do a movement session in the PM, you want to kind of do more of a parasympathetic movement session, right? Some good stretching and foam rolling and deep exhales. That's going to honor that rhythm. And especially if you are dysregulated like I am for clock, you want to have as many epigenetic mechanisms in place as possible to honor that rhythm. So things like light, things like movement, you want to make sure that your body understands and you tell it if you are absolutely dysregulated for these genes. This is morning, we do this in the morning. This is evening, we do that in the evening. And if you can do that, you'll find that it kind of auto regulates your circadian rhythm. It's a really fascinating thing. Have you ever done that, Felicia? Do you do like a AM session and a PM session, but make one stressful and one not so much?
Definitely. So I am a morning person. My genes say I am. In my head, I'm like, no, you're not. But my genes say I am. And I do find that when I work out in the morning, yeah, I create endorphins. And my workouts are usually stronger, especially if I can get them done. And when I say morning, like 6 a.m. to noon, that's morning. If I get them done at like 10, I feel really, really good. I That's kind of my sweet spot. I know if I were to, and I usually don't, I do it separately. I train in the morning as far as lifting weights, the heavy stuff, and then I do cardio later. I don't do them together. I like to break them up in my head. It just works better for me. But I do find at night, that's when I do not so strenuous cardio. I'm not like pumping it out at the gym, but I am doing cardio, but it's going to look a little bit different. So yeah, that my circadian rhythms are back like, okay, we're winding down. It's the end of the day. I've put in the work and it does, but it does help. I have found that when you get into a routine, and with a lot of us, that when you stay in that routine, yes, I feel better, I sleep better, my mood is better, and things just seem to go better, right? I don't dwell and, oh my gosh, I didn't get this done, that done. So it does, yes, it works better for me.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said about that separation of those two forms of exercise as well, because like if the goal is muscle hypertrophy, right? You're trying to either break down the myofibrils and get myofibrillar hypertrophy, or you're just trying to pump the muscle up and get that sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, fill it with blood and get the nutrients and oxygen into the muscle. If you were to conduct a workout aimed at that hypertrophy, and then do cardio right after, the thing is, when you do cardio, now you're actually going to take all that blood that you just put in the muscle and you're just going to recirculate it everywhere. So if you're trying to build muscle and get a pump, let's say you're trying to hit shoulders and you just spent an hour pumping your shoulders up to build them, and then you hop on a treadmill, well, guess what's going to happen? All the blood that you just worked hard for to get the blood in the muscle, that blood is now going to leave the muscle. It has to if you start doing cardio. So something to bear in mind when it comes to that. However, what I would say as well is if you're aiming for just general resistance training benefits and you want to do a little hybrid scenario where you do some jump rope after or something like that and get some athletic benefits there, I do think that there's a reason and a time and a place for that as well. This is why we have people working with someone like Felicia to orchestrate it to make it so that you get the most benefit out of your workout as well. I mean, there's so many different ways to skin that particular cat.
I agree. And if time wise, if you literally just can't get it in 2 times a day, then I'm all for, okay, yeah, do work out and then get your cardio in. However you can, you can do it. That's not like, oh no, you have to do it at night. That's just worked best for me. And I should have clarified, yes, I work for that's a hard word for me, for muscle gains. I go for the figure look, for the shapely look. So I should have clarified that.
Yeah, just call them gains. That's just fine. And shout out
Just
to Lynn in
gains.
the comments. She said, "Ouch, poor kitty." That is a particularly grotesque saying. The skinning the cat. I have 2 cats myself, and I love cats. I would never hurt them. Um, all right, so let's move on then to some of these other genes. So let's talk about some considerations for cardiovascular training. There's genes like 9p21, NOS3, and then there's even some of these detox pathways in the DNA 360 that we look at that are of relevance here. Felicia, I mean, having competed in bodybuilding, I'm sure that you've spent a fair share of time thinking about nitric oxide, talking about nitric oxide. What is it and why is it relevant for cardiovascular endurance as well as muscle building?
I really look at this gene when I look at clients and then within myself. So it's oxygen delivery and if you have fast twitch or slow twitch muscle fibers, and that looks really different to everybody. I have a fast twitch muscle fiber, so I do well with high endurance. And those who have a slow twitch, you do well with not so much. You kind of like the power lifters that we're going to do the 1 to 5 range, lift really heavy, but we're going to rest then. You have lactic acid that usually builds up pretty quickly. So, and that all has to do with oxygen and how the body regulates it. But it is a thing. So I love this gene because when you break it down, that kind of gives you that comparison thing. Well, how come Bob over here is a huge power lifter and he just does it, but I can't get there? I'm not saying you can't get there. It's just going to take you a little bit longer than it does Bob because he carries different kinds of genes. So this is huge for me. It does it muscle recovery. How are you going to, how long is it going to take you in between sets, reps, days of workout? It matters a lot.
Yeah, nitric oxide, I mean, we know that blood flow counts for so much, like that's how your body delivers nutrients, hormones, oxygen, etc. So the genes that we're referencing here, it's called NOS3, and that's really specific for endothelial nitric oxide. And really, if you're suboptimal there, I mean, that's going to impair your blood vessels' capacity to dilate, especially when you start exercising. So when that NOS3 gene is suboptimal, I really recommend doing something to boost that up a little bit. And strategies like red light therapy work pretty well there. You could do that pre-workout. You can do that post-workout. There's tons of ingredients that help, like L-citrulline, L-arginine, ornithine, agmatine sulfate. Oh, there's watermelon extract and beet extract. And a lot of these different things can either boost it directly or they're precursors that help to boost it and prolong it as well. So you can have those in kind of pre-workout formulas and things like that, especially if that gene's suboptimal for you. Do a little something to boost that up because it's fantastic. I really like sun tanning as well for that purpose. I'm in Canada and we can't really do that right now. So red light therapy, it works great and it helps to boost up that nitric oxide. I would say that another really important consideration for how much cardiovascular training you do, the frequency, the volume would be 9p21. This is actually the first thing I look at in someone's cardiovascular panel because it's a chromosomal locus. So it's actually a location on the chromosome. And we measure it as far as how many Gs did you get. And you can have anywhere from 0G all the way up to 6G. 3G would be the sort of common genotype. But the more Gs you have, the thinner and the more at risk your blood vessels, your endothelium are. So when we have thinner blood vessels there, thinner endothelium, it means that they're going to be more reactive to inflammation at the level of the blood vessels. So let's say you have a 4, 5, heaven forbid, 6G. You're not going to be someone who's going to do fantastic with marathons and things like that. because they're going to be taking a pounding. There's going to be a lot of inflammation associated with that high volume cardio. And we want to, at the very least, protect it with some heart healthy ingredients, like CoQ10 and astaxanthin and stuff like that. But honestly, I would say that this guides how much cardio you ought to be doing. And if you're doing a lot of it and you have a 4, 5, or 6G, especially for 9P21, I would recommend considering cutting that out and maybe replacing it with more of a strength training, some yoga, even just going for a walk instead of the high intensity, because that's going to be a lot less damaging. And then anti-inflammatory strategies, right? So like grounding and heat exposure and cold exposure. You can take in turmeric and different things to help this particular profile. You've also got to moderate the nervous system a little bit too, because if you're staying in a sympathetic state, like a lot of marathon runners do, there's a lot of kind of corresponding inflammation that takes place there. So one little strategy I like to use to get me out of a sympathetic state after a hard workout, if it's cardio, strength training, whatever, is I'll take a minute to do some parasympathetic breathing, right? Because you're just, everything is sympathetic and your body's really in that stressed out catabolic state because you're training. When you're done, try to isolate a little bit of time to just do some of those slow exhales, right? Restore the nervous system back, because that will get your recovery happening a lot quicker. Felicia, would you want to touch a little bit on some of these detox pathways, right? Because that's when we're training and doing a lot of cardio, especially, we build up a heck of a lot of free radicals and toxins in the body. It's just a natural metabolic waste. But some people don't have good glutathione pathways, good SOD2 pathways, and that makes it so that their mitochondria get gummed up with those reactive oxygen species a lot quicker. You want to talk a little bit about that and the relevance for exercise?
Yeah, SOD2, yes, is very, very important. I find that depending on how you need to recover and get rid of these, is it going to be like a cold plunge? Do your genes, take you to where that would be recovery for you, or a sauna? Sauna is so good for recovery. Red light therapy, how does that going to help, get rid of things? I also like to tell my clients that movement, if it's slow movement, recovery movement, and that could be anything from a slow recovery walk or maybe some stretching, some yoga, that along with deep breathing, kind of whatever helps you recover. Kind of, but your genes will tell you, if you're suboptimal, that it's going to be a little bit harder. So you might have your workout's going to look a little different than somebody who is optimal, obviously, and that will have to do with, if you're suboptimal, your intensity on workouts are not going to be like the suboptimal, right? I mean, so it's just going to take you a little bit longer to recover. That person, I have a client that she's doing so well, so well. Oh my gosh, I'm so impressed. But she got so jazzed that she was like, I'm going to do a 5K. And I was like, wonderful. I'm so excited that she wants to do it. But her SO2 gene doesn't allow her to recover very well. So afterwards, she was like, oh my gosh, I'm down for like a couple of days. Well, yeah, because your body takes a little bit longer to recover. Doesn't mean you can't do them, because it doesn't mean that you're just not cut out for that. It just means it's just going to look a little bit different, and we'll work our way through that with, let's take a rest day, a recovery day, however it looks to you. Go sit in a sauna, go do some light walking. Don't, let's recover. So that's what it looks like for me.
Yeah, and that really is about harnessing your epigenetics, right? So let's say that you do have something in your genes that suggests that you shouldn't be doing this type of training, but in your heart of hearts, you just want to run that marathon, you just want to hit that extra workout. Well, that's where the value is, because if we understand that, okay, if you want to do something that's out of alignment with your genes, what we need to do then, I'm not going to tell you not to live your lifestyle the way you want to, but what I will say is, in the spirit of keeping you healthy, right, and mitigating downsides to what you're going to do, well, let's harness the epigenetic components there. So like the rest day, well, that's an epigenetic thing. You're choosing to give your body that break. I have clients that do tons of running and stuff, and I'm saying, listen, in your genes, there's reasons why you probably shouldn't, but if you're going to do it because you're a sovereign adult, well, let's put a few things in place. So I might have them drink hydrogen water pre and post run, right? Because that helps to really clear those free radicals a little bit quicker. I might have them taking in additional antioxidants or peptides like carbon 60. I might have them doing infrared sauna post workout or post run each and every time just to upregulate that clearance mechanism, because genetically that job isn't being done super well. And then on top of that, you're stacking the epigenetics because you're living a lifestyle that doesn't align with that. So, what we now need to do is take what we can to make sure that you're mitigating that downside on your physiology. So, what we're talking about, folks, is the mitochondria. We're talking about free radicals being built up in there, and we need to accelerate that clearance if you have suboptimal SOD2. Full disclosure, I have totally suboptimal SOD2, and I'm an athlete. So, that's why I get a little fired up about this particular topic, because I know that you have to put certain things in place, or doing a lot of cardio is literally making you older, right? It's making your cells age faster, and that's absolutely not what anyone wants. So, yeah, harnessing the epigenetics matters a heck of a lot there.
We also, I'm sorry, we don't want to, when you continue doing that, if you're, suboptimal, then you run into like burnout, or you run into injuries, and then you're so confused and pissed off because you're like, why am I tired? And why I'm trying so hard to be a runner, or I'm so, that's the beauty of knowing your genetics, of like, oh, okay, I still can run, but I've got to take a little bit more care, right? So that's one thing I love about that gene. So it's like, okay, I can still do it, but okay, I'm going to have some recovery, and it's okay, because I don't want to hurt myself, and I don't want my clients to be overtrained. That's the worst, right? Because then they feel like a failure, and they feel like they failed you, and that's not it at all. It's a learning thing, right? It's a learning process, and but that's the beauty in that gene, and that's really important. Says a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Like the detox pathways are some of the most important things in the whole DNA 360. Like when I go over red flag consults with people, that's usually one of the first sections that I'm looking at, because it matters for everything. If your body doesn't detox well, then I need to know that as your coach, because then we can put strategies and interventions in place to upregulate the jobs that aren't being done. And speaking of relevance of genes and how this all kind of works, there's a couple of studies that we were able to find that were really interesting about the relationship between genetics and fitness and how that all goes. There's a couple studies we were able to pull up. Felicia, do you want to maybe cover the first one, and then beach ball it
Yeah,
over to me, and I'll cover the second one?
for sure. So the first study, let me get to it real quick. Okay, this study looked at how multiple genetic variants together influence improvements in endurance and VO max after structured training. So what they found, with people with more favorable endurance related SNPs, saw dramatically higher gains in stamina and cardiovascular fitness. What I love about this is the fitness results are going to depend upon your genes. Doesn't mean that you are destined for one or the other, but it gives you insight to what it is that works best for your body, and what workout is going to give you the most bang for your buck. So it helps you understand that pathway of, oh, okay, I need to do X, Y, and Z, instead of what I feel like the social media is telling me that this and this and this works best. So that's what I love about this. And when someone says, I try a program and it just doesn't work for me. Well, this is the beauty of it. There's so many clients that I run into and have, they're like, well, they do this and it doesn't, and I've tried it, it doesn't work. Well, no, because you're not built like she is or he is, or you don't have the same genes. But guess what? Let's put together what your genes say you can do, and the outcome can be just as good or better, however you take it to that level, that what you're going to look like at the end. What do you
Yeah,
think
so
about that?
it's illustrating exactly what we're talking about. And there's another study that was really interesting as well. where it was a large genetic analysis that examined multiple human training studies, so strength, endurance, power training, to understand how much of exercise response is genetically determined. And what they found is that genetics actually explained up to 72% of variability in strength gains. Around 44% of endurance and cardiovascular improvements were also genetically influenced. And people doing the exact same workout program often saw very different results because their genes controlled how well their muscles, their mitochondria, and their cardiovascular systems actually adapted. So the key takeaway here is that training response varies enormously between individuals, even on identical programs. So again, Felicia does the DNA Fit program, which I believe at the end of this, we're going to have a little discount code for. So keep your eyes on the chat there for that. But genes regulating oxygen use and muscle adaptation, oxidative stress, strongly predicted whether someone improved quickly or slowly. And some people are just genetically wired to respond more strongly to certain training styles, and others need more customized approaches as well. So it's quite relevant. And that's exactly what we're talking about, right? It's like you can literally have you and your friend and your neighbor and your cousin do the same strength training program. And there's going to be potentially 4 different results from the same stimulus. And it's because we have different oxidative stress pathways. We have different satiety signals, nitric oxide, different sex hormones, which is what we're going to talk about next. That ultimately determines a lot of what that outcome looks like. Should we harness that information, we're going to land you in the best case scenario to get the best results possible. Speaking of the sex hormones, I mean, that's really relevant, right? Like we have a whole panel there. If you guys have had your DNA 360 done, it's called Hormones, Fitness, and Body Type. And it's one of the more complicated pathways that we look at. So I'll kind of preface this a little bit by just briefly going over what it is. So we look at a bunch of different genes from especially this family called CYP, that's the cytochrome P450 family, and they encode a lot of enzymes that are associated with this steroidogenesis pathway. So it's a step-by-step process, and the first gene that we look at is called CYP17A1, and that is the gene that converts progesterone into testosterone. That's a really important first step. If you have a faster enzyme associated with CYP17A1, it means you're going to get a lot of that testosterone pulse off of your progesterone, and that creates what we call a dominant profile. You have dominance, hormone dominance, because you're making a lot of sex hormones right off the bat. That can be good or bad because sex hormones are good for lots of stuff, but they can also create other downstream effects in the body, and they can heighten certain predispositions for toxicity and different things as well. Hormones are very powerful. So once we determine that by looking at the CYP17A1 gene, then we look at one called SRD5A2, and that is to determine how much of that testosterone now is going to convert to DHT, dihydrotestosterone. I call it testosterone on testosterone because DHT is like a super potent form of testosterone. And once you establish if there's a lot of that DHT conversion, there's good and bad in that, but it can be quite toxic. So there's also this pathway that we look at called glucuronidation, and it's strongly involved in androgen clearance and breakdown. So does your body now get rid of that DHT properly? If it doesn't, there can be a lot of hormone-related stuff going on with like inflammation, cystic acne, balding, all kinds of stuff can come from that. And that's a gene family called UGT. So there's 2 that we look at. There's a UGT2B17, and there's also a 2B15. That's glucuronidation, and it's relative to the androgen clearance. So we know what the progesterone to testosterone ratio is. We know what the testosterone to DHT ratio is. We also need to look at aromatization, right? Because estrogen dominance, that creates people that are going to be a lot, more they have tendencies towards water storage, and it's a little bit difficult for them to get lean and stuff like that. So there's a gene called CYP19A1 that does that aromatizing from testosterone to estrogen. So if you have a fast enzyme there and the dominant profile, those 2 together make what we call estrogen dominance. Then from there, we also look at metabolites. So there's downstream stuff that happens. The estrogen can convert to protective metabolites like 2-OH or inflammatory metabolites like 16-alpha hydroxyestrogen or 4-hydroxyestrogen. And there's genes that steer that pathway as well in that CYP family. Now, another interesting thing that we look at is called AR. That's the androgen receptor. And I'm telling you, that's a good one to look at, because if you have a suboptimal androgen receptor, it means that your androgens, right, your testosterones, they don't bind to the receptor properly. So it makes it a lot harder to put on muscle. Pro tip, if you do have a suboptimal AR gene, I recommend really prioritizing leg training as best as you possibly can, because your quadriceps and your glutes, there's a lot of androgen receptors in those big muscle groups. And the more that you can hit those, the more that you're going to activate the androgen receptors. And that makes it so that you build muscle in your whole body, right? So leg training can actually help you build arms, believe it or not. It can help you build chest and shoulders, believe it or not, because of the hormone pulse that comes alongside that. Felicia, do you see a lot of correlation in your clients between the differences in their sex hormone pathways and what their acquired phenotype looks like their actual body type and how they show up?
Oh, yeah, you can tell exactly how a person is built. I can get a pretty good idea. I deal a lot more with females than I do males. I do have some males, and they're different to train than girls, obviously. Let me back up. They're not different as far as how we do the exercise, but the intensity and what that looks like is different across the board. When it comes to lifting weights, everybody should lift the same. I'm talking, the same. We all have the same body parts. We all have legs and shoulders and arms and but it may look different in the the form of it, how many reps and sets. I look at the gene that's CYP19A1. I really look at that in females for me to see if they are estrogen dominant. That's a big deal for me because like you said, they tend to have cellulite and they tend to have, they hang on to water. That's me. I'm in that field. So those women, I have to do higher reps. Like we're doing 8 to 15 reps. It's a lot more than just okay, your basic 6 to 10 reps. More reps mean a better outcome with that gene. So I tend to look more at the female part of it. But when it comes to testosterone, it's very important because I also know that on the guy's side and women, we all have testosterone too. So it does affect how we're going to build muscle and how we are going to get to where we want to be. With guys, it's a lot funner because guys, to me, I can say, let's go lift the house. And they're like, let's go do it. Women are more like, I want to be strong, but I don't want to be bulky. So these genes can kind of tell me what that pathway is going to look like. Are we going to be able to build really quickly and strong? Or is the pathway going to take us a little bit longer, but we can still reach the end goals, we can still get there. It may just take us a little longer. In 12 weeks, it may take us 16 weeks versus somebody who has different pathways and can get there in 12.
Yeah, and you can really see the difference within body types as well. So like when we have if you're dominant, right? So that's that first step, the progesterone to testosterone. If you have dominance there, then if you have the testosterone dominance, you're way more likely to have that mesomorphic body type, right? That's the Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of look where it's just big and jacked and lean. And that's from having a lot of that testosterone conversion. Whereas if you have more of an estrogen body type, you're going to just generally be thicker. There's going to be more water and things like that in there as well. It can translate to strength, right? So you can still have a lot of strength with estrogen dominance. But if you have what we call the balanced profile, like you don't get a lot of testosterone conversion off that initial progesterone. So if your CYP17A1 is slower, that means that you're not getting a lot of that sex hormone pulse, and you have just enough sex hormones to either look like a biological man or woman. But the difference in the body type is that you end up being generally one of the more kind of thin body types because the sex hormones aren't thickening you up. So this is a funny little thing. I am the exact same height as my father, right? We're both like 6 feet tall, kind of taller guys. But I have dominance and I've done his genes and he has a balanced profile. So even though we're both the same height, my hormone status is different. And I'm literally just 80 pounds thicker than my dad is, right? My dad's like on the thinner end. He still got the old man strength and all that, but I'm just generally 80 pounds just thicker. I'm just a thicker guy. I have thick everything, right? So that's because of that hormone pathway and how it steers. So this really translates to that body type. And that means that we have to kind of dial in the training that much more. Estrogen dominance means that we've got to be that much more disciplined about your macros and things, your sodium intake, your carb intake, if the goal is to get lean. If you have the androgen dominance, well, yeah, you're going to build muscle and get lean easy, but there's going to be inflammatory health problems that we got to be aware of. And if you have the balanced body type, that means that we need to do a lot more to put on that muscle because you're not naturally making a heck of a lot of testosterone. So we may need more amino acids. We may need higher, like heavier training loads, higher creatine doses, whatever it is. But we can really see in that hormone pathway why that showed up that way. So that's, I think, the power of it. While we're on that topic, Felicia, do you have any, like, let's say someone really is just having trouble gaining muscle. Do you have any special personal trainer tricks or anything that you utilize for that?
First and foremost, it's how we eat. I mean, for the trick for me is what are you, then I have to go, what are you eating? Like, what does that look like? What do your calories look like? How much protein are you getting? Are we fueling the muscles? Are we recovering the muscles? Um, Trick wise, no, it's slow it consistency. It's you got to be so consistent and you got to lift heavy. Um, but again, it would have to do with sets and reps and how you recover. Um, do you have any little tricks like, you know, now I can do a fake trick. A fake trick is let's get some blood flow and let's get a good pump going, and you're gonna feel jacked, during that high pump. But we know that we're breaking down the muscle and we're rebuilding it, so it's going to get stronger. But in the gym, you're like, yeah, I'm pretty buff and big.
Yeah. Well, there's so many like inputs, right, and avenues that you can do. I mean, it may be a matter of having, carb backloading, like making sure that right when they're done training that they have some carbohydrates, some protein, some creatine. I mean, worst case scenario, we'll put them on some peptides or something crazier, right? And you can get people there. But what I would say is that a good rule of thumb, if you are having difficulty putting muscle on, is to mix up the set and rep ranges so that your body has to continually adapt to it. So that's called periodization, right? Like you have to change the workout stimulus. And for reference here, 1 to 5 repetitions, we've talked about this before, Felicia and I, but 1 to 5 would be that strength range. And that range tends to build a little bit of muscle density because you're lifting as heavy as you can, where that 5th rep, you can barely get it. Like you're on the verge of death. That 6th rep will not happen. So that's strength range, and that tends to amplify the growth hormone signal. Then the 6 to 12 repetition range is myofibrillar hypertrophy. So that's what's breaking down and ripping those myofibrils. That's a really handy rep range to have. And again, the exertion should be there. So that 12th rep, you shouldn't be able to get to a 13 and 14. You should be really struggling right there. And there's something called a slow eccentric, where when you push the weight out, that's the concentric movement. When you pull it back in, I'm talking about like a bench press or an overhead press. When the muscle is lengthening now under tension, that's the eccentric portion. And there's a lot more breakdown that happens there. So you can do slower reps on that lengthening portion, and that causes a lot more hypertrophy. When you get up over 12 repetitions and you're now 15, 20 repetitions, that's sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. That's just pumping the heck out of the fascia and stretching it out and filling the muscle with blood. So I recommend, if you're having trouble putting on muscle, that you dabble in all of the above. Usually my strength workouts right now look like doing my primary movement with like 3 to 5 repetitions. And then I do my accessory movements with like 8 to 12 repetitions. And then at the end, it's a burnout with just as many reps as I can get with the super light weight. So now I've got my 1 to 5, I've got my 6 to 12, and I've got my sarcoplasmic hypertrophy at the end as a little burnout. Your heart rate goes up at that point as well. So you get a little bit of a cardiovascular adaptation there too. And then it's all about fueling. It's all about rest, right? And you can also boost hormones up with various ingredients, right? Fenugreek and Tonkat Ali and Tribulus and D-aspartic acid. I mean, that particular list goes on and on. So we attack it, right? We attack it with nutrition, with how we train, with how we recover. All of these things may be necessary if you're serious about it. But generally, I just recommend that not muscle confusion, but just kind of mixing it up so that your body has to adapt. If you do the same 3 sets of 8 with the same movement and the same weight, the body's designed to get efficient, right? And it's just like, okay, I know what this dude's going to do. Now we do this and we do 3x8 and now we do that and it's 2x6. And it won't have a reason because the stimulus is the same over and over again. The body doesn't have a reason to adapt and build. So once it gets used to that 3x8, you slow those reps down, you up the weight, you change the angle, right? There's a lot of different ways. And that's where Felicia is such an expert, because to become a professional bodybuilder, you have to muff your muscles up over and over and over again. So you switch angles and exercises and modalities and equipment just like that.
Agree. Also, I also incorporate when I'm not like training for a competition, but in general. So like I do 8 weeks of like a continuous exercise, but then maybe for the next 4 weeks, I may switch it up and do like very high reps, very lower weight. So I keep the body guessing. So you keep your muscles like Justin, like you said, you've got to keep them guessing, because otherwise it's just like a runner's like who could run 10 miles and it's like nothing. You just build up endurance. Your body goes, okay, we know we're going to do this. I also change the exercises. So say that you've done bench press for 8 weeks. Let's go to dumbbell bench press. Let's go to individuals instead of like a bar. Let's do something totally different that, again, your muscles are going to go, oh, okay, it's a different movement. If it even goes from machines to dumbbells or vice versa, or just changing the angle and reps and sets. So it's you have to keep the body guessing and moving and growing to change. Because I know you and I both seen those people in the gym that, bless their hearts, they're working hard and they're there all, but I've been there for like 3 years and they don't look any different. Now they look great, but I know that, what they're doing, they want to look the best they can. And when you do the kind of workouts that Justin and I are talking about and variations, you're going to get more bang for your buck for sure.
Absolutely. Like I said in the very beginning of the call, in order to advance, you have to fill more than your current place. I mean, this directly translates to how you're training. So I'm a big fan of that whole strategy. Mix it up and make sure that you're throwing different stimulus at the muscle. Give it a reason to adapt. This is all about adaptation at the end of the day. So that's fitness. It's looking like we're getting to the top of the hour. We got a bunch of questions that we got to work through. Do you want to go ahead and dive in?
Well, let's do it.
All right. Okay, so the first question is coming from Sue. Hello, Sue. She said, you mentioned dopamine, and what about endorphins? Which are the gift from a great workout? Sue, the answer to that would be both, actually. Those are both a gift that you would get from the workout. One thing that's really interesting, I did a whole webinar with, I think it was Dr. Sapp, about dopamine. And a lot of the times people end up with dopamine dysregulation surrounding workouts because they tend to preface their workout with a bunch of dopamine spiking things. So like you go to your workout and you've got to get fired up for it first. So a lot of people will drink a heavily caffeinated and fruit flavored pre-workout drink, and then they'll blast their favorite music in their ear, and then they'll watch a motivational video, and they'll do all this stuff to get the dopamine up, up, up. And then the actual workout should give you a dopamine spike as well. But you've already doubled and tripled up on things that give you dopamine, and that can actually amplify the crash after. So that's one thing to bear in mind with regard to dopamine and working out, and that you may want to now and then just go to the gym with nothing to motivate you but your own heart and soul, right? We all love to have a beat going and be fired up and in the zone and in flow state and all these things. I think sometimes you should walk into the gym in absolute silence and pick up the weights and lift them. I really do, because that's going to help moderate this dopaminergic response. And then it's important to remember that the higher that dopamine climbs, there's this slingshot effect that happens in the brain where it will actually lower below baseline to the same level that it accelerated to. right? So if this is your baseline, you do a bunch of things to raise it up, it is going to lower to the same depth as it did to the height that you spiked it towards. And over time, what can happen is it creates this neural pathway where now you have to do all this stuff to get motivated for the gym. I'm sure there's people in the audience that have experienced that. I've experienced that where it's like, okay, now I can't get into the gym unless I have my pre-workout drink and I have to listen to this song and I have to watch this bodybuilding video, right? And it's like, this is now something where we've overdone it on the dopamine pathways. So sometimes strip it down, everything's simple, go in, hit the weights, eat a normal meal, don't do 50,000 supplements, just go raw right now and then. And that will help to kind of keep this dopamine pathway operating. And as far as the endorphins, absolutely, that's something that gets released because your body for a minute thinks it's going to die, right? I mean, when you're training hard, that's one of these mechanisms that gets kicked off and it makes you feel good. I think that the BDNF piece is also of relevance. You feel good after because your BDNF is amplified, and exercise does that as well. Anything to add to that, Felicia?
No, you said that very well. I agree with you totally. Sometimes, like you said, when you go into the gym and nothing, sometimes less is better in certain circumstances, right? I've been to the gym and like they didn't turn the music on, so it's pretty quiet. And I usually don't do AirPods. I'm pretty self-centered, but yeah, I've been in the gym when there hadn't been any music, and I've had great workouts. Like you have to it kind of brings me back to like focus and kind of a reality check. Like, oh, okay, I don't have the music in my ear, and I don't have, this or that, and I didn't take all the supplements, and it's kind of refreshing. Again, I think it's kind of a reality check and kind of brings you back to kind of center sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's good. Simplify, right? Sometimes we need to do that in life. Okay, so SM Clark has a question saying, as you talk about each gene, would you mind clarifying what is optimal and suboptimal, as in what result might we see on our report? So let me just pull this up and I'll do this a little bit rapid fire. So, folks, if you have a pen and paper handy, there's also replays available of this. So I'll go through what some of these alleles look like and some of the genes that we touched on. So for the AR gene, the androgen receptor that I mentioned, the G allele is suboptimal and the A allele is optimal. Now, if you have the AG in the middle, that's also going to be slightly suboptimal there, but not terrible. The just straight GG is the one that you want to watch out for with that. For BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, the C is suboptimal and the T is optimal. CT is also suboptimal there. For the clock gene, right, that's the one that's for circadian rhythmicity. G is suboptimal, A is optimal, AG is also suboptimal. COMT, we talked about that for dopamine clearance and stress resilience. The A there is suboptimal, the G is optimal. AG is kind of moderate. It's not considered either of the above. It's kind of a medium genotype. Let's see, CYP17A1. The A would be fast and the G would be slow, right? So just go back and hear what I said about that. Fast enzyme means a lot more conversion. Slow means less conversion. CYP19A1 is the gene that's for the estrogen conversion from the testosterone. The G means optimal, so you're not getting a lot of conversion there, and the A is suboptimal there, so you're getting quite a bit of conversion. Let's see, what else did we talk about? FTO, the A is suboptimal and the T is optimal. AT is also suboptimal. And I think those are the main ones that we touched on. Put in the chat if there's anything else. Oh, there's also SOD2, where the G is suboptimal and the A is optimal and the AG is medium or moderate. So I hope that helps. I know that that's kind of a slog to have to sit there and listen to, but that's what it means. And by the way, your reports are made with an algorithm that will say if your genotype is optimal or suboptimal. So bear that in mind. Sue has another question here saying, what if you do the cardio first, followed by weightlifting right after? What's your opinion on that, Felicia?
I am against doing cardio first. I don't, and this is my personal opinion. I think that if you want to warm up, I think that's good. But I want to spend all my energy in the weightlifting because I want you to gain muscle and I want you to use the majority of your energy toward the muscle building. I find that if you do cardio first, then when you go do the weightlifting, you're not as you're kind of, depending on what kind of cardio you did you run or did you just walk or did you walk on a hill or incline? Um, so for me and my opinion, I would say weightlifting first. What about you, Justin?
Yeah, I the reason why I'm not the biggest fan, as far as if you do have the intention of building muscle, I'm not the biggest fan of doing cardio first because what does happen is it depletes the glycogen storages that you have, right? And we need glycogen because that really helps with recovery and with getting you a proper pump and things like that. So if you do cardio beforehand, you're going to subtract all of the stored carbohydrates that exist in your muscles. And then when you go to do your lift, it's very likely that you're not going to have the strength capacity that you would have had before. And if you don't have the strength capacity, you can't lift as heavy. If you can't lift as heavy, you can't get the requisite breakdown of the muscles because you've pre-exhausted the muscles, kind of. So that's the reason why I'm not the biggest fan of it. However, if there's time constraints, issues where you just have to get it in that way, you're still going to get adaptations and positive things. You're going to be in shape. It's just not optimal when it comes to strength training to do that right before. I would prioritize a little bit of separation. Maybe if you did cardio in the morning, rested a bit, reloaded with a good breakfast and some good electrolytes and things like that, then hit the weights even just a little bit after that. That'll mitigate some of that issue. But yeah, as far as depleting glycogen and then lifting, you're going to be mitigating some of the lifting benefits.
Especially if you're doing legs. I mean, if you're going to lift legs, if it's leg day, I definitely wouldn't do cardio first. Absolutely not.
Yeah. Lisa has a question. I think this one's more directed at yourself because you were talking about different types of muscle fibers. So, do these muscle fibers play a role in how upper body tends to be lean than lower body for females? I think she might be talking about the fast versus the slow twitch. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, you either have fast or slow. So, but your body makeup could be that you are leaner on top. And this would all go back to like estrogen dominance and how you carry it. You might have a bigger lower bottom or you carry more of the weight down there. So the training would still look the same if you have fast twitch muscle fibers or slow twitch muscle fibers. It's just your body's gonna look different. So I guess the way I'm reading this is no, you're not going to have like fast twitch up here and slow twitch down here or vice versa. Now you can train them differently. Even though I have fast twitch muscle fibers, I can train slow twitch and that does, it does look different, but the way I'm reading it is no, you only have one type and that's how we're going to train that one type. You just need to know, do you have fast or do you have slow?
All right, thank you. So, Marianne has a question here, and the question is basically saying that has 6G 9P21. So, reminding the audience that means that there's a thinner endothelium there, and NOS3 gene, the nitric oxide gene, is GT, which is slightly suboptimal, kind of moderate, but not ideal, and trying to start resistance training again since losing weight. What supplements do you recommend? And do I really need to completely avoid HIIT, high intensity interval training, due to my genes, or can I supplement with H2 or others to allow me to do that exercise? So I have a few thoughts on that. First of all, as far as supplementation is concerned, there is one supplement that I'm a big fan of that we're not associated or anything, but I think that it's the most well-rounded formula I've seen for people that have those higher G's in 9P21, as well as people who have nitric oxide issues. That supplement is called Cardio Miracle, and it's really a combination of a bunch of different nitric oxide precursors that elevate nitric oxide for up to 12 hours, but you take it twice a day, right? So you get a full 24-hour of that blood vessel dilation. And then once the blood vessels are dilated, it has all these other fantastic anti-inflammatory and antioxidant nutrients. So it's got your grapeseed extract and astaxanthin, organic turmeric, all these things that are in place to help kind of heal that endothelium and boosting the nitric oxide as well. So that's a really valuable supplement for that. Those ingredients are what you're after, right? It's not about brands, it's about ingredients. So having all those precursors and antioxidants, anti-inflammatory ingredients are great. As far as avoiding HIIT altogether, no, I don't think you have to avoid it altogether. I think that it's a matter of understanding volume and frequency. We need to make sure that we're not overdoing any hormetic stress, right? Your body is more prone to that vascular inflammation and the damage there. So you can absolutely utilize different supplements and things. HIIT training is great in a way because it's shorter duration, right? So I would also point you towards your SOD2 and some of the other things that we looked at and try to really map this out, because if your body efficiently clears free radicals, and if you have other genes that are working in your favor with your detox pathways, vitamin D pathways, things that are anti-inflammatory, and then you add in things like grounding, the hydrogen water, the saunas, all these great strategies, by all means, you can add in some HIIT. It doesn't mean never do it. There's positive adaptations you'll get from that. But overdoing that stress is a pretty dangerous thing from the perspective of your cardiovascular system. So if it's a concern, I would honestly recommend a coaching call with myself where I can go through a bunch of stuff with you. But just know that, like I said earlier, none of these things means you can't live the lifestyle you want to live. But we may need to put some additional interventions in place to make sure we're mitigating downsides. Anything to add to that, Felicia?
No, beautiful. Yes.
Okay. Patricia has a question. Hey, Patricia. She's asking where in the reports is this information located? So we kind of jumped around quite a bit. There was ones like the BDNF and the COMT, that's in your executive function, so the mood and behavior profile. Then the hormone profile. I mean, I pretty much went over that whole thing. So the hormone, fitness, and body type. The free radical clearance there is in your anti-inflammatory reports, and there's a sub-report called antioxidation that's especially important, but all of your glutathione reports as well matter there. Then the cardiovascular reports, that's where you'll find NOS3 and 9P21. What the heck else did we talk about tonight, Felicia? Anything else?
Some cardiovascular, and we've kind of been all over the place. When it comes to fitness and health, you kind of go all over the place, right? You're at lifting and food and sleep and cardiovascular. So
yeah, so that's the other part I missed, was that we did touch on the FTO gene, which that's in your diet report. So good call, Felicia. That's one that I missed there, but that is where you'll find them. Okay, so Jennifer is asking a question here, saying that she unfortunately joined late. Don't worry about it. This all gets re-uploaded to YouTube thereafter on the DNA Company YouTube page. So she's saying perhaps you already answered this, but how do you know what your profile looks like? E.g., how do I know if inflammation is more my problem versus something else? So inflammation is a really big topic, and we've done a lot of great webinars on inflammation because your detox pathways matter there, your cardio system matters there, your vitamin D status, your gut status, all of that will matter for how your body manages inflammation. So what I would say is that there isn't one sovereign area in your report, but I think that the anti-inflammatory report as a whole covers a lot of it because it talks about methylation, glutathionization, antioxidation, vitamin D. So that's a great place to start within the reports. And then that can kind of highlight where the problematic areas are, as well as where the areas are that you're doing well. Right. So again, if you need guidance, by all means, you can email ceo@thednacompany.com. Ask for myself, ask for Felicia. We can orchestrate a session and go through your genes and see where the issues are. All right. So SM has another question here asking, what is suboptimal SOD2? I'm not sure if that's referencing the alleles there. Suboptimal SOD2, just for clarification, that is the enzyme that actually clears reactive oxygen species out of your mitochondria. When we exercise, your body makes a lot of ATP. A natural metabolic waste to that is free radicals. They're called reactive oxygen species. When we don't have optimal SOD2, these reactive oxygen species will be accelerated. They will not clear properly from the mitochondria. That causes inflammation, DNA damage, toxicity in the body as well. And as a reminder to the allele, everybody's favorite part, the alleles. Let me just pull it up here. So the G is suboptimal and the A is optimal. An AG would be in the middle. So neither of the above, but not perfectly optimal either.
I would recommend also if you are suboptimal in workouts, it would look more like a 2 to 3 day workout, not a 4 to 6 day at the gym workout. You're going to be more conscious of recovery and not high intense cardio. You're going to be more on the lower end of that if you're suboptimal.
Yeah, good call. And again, it's all about how your body detoxes and how you
Right.
do that. So Marianne had just a second part to the question saying, so that, the 9P216G and male age 67 with a coronary calcium score of 499, is it extremely important to not stress this pathway? So I'm not a doctor here and I'm not your doctor either. But what I will say is that anything that's representative of plaque formation or calcification is something that you're going to want to pay attention to with regard to moderating inflammation and making sure that we don't have a lot of toxicity in the body. Typically, calcium buildup and these things happen because we have inflammation going on, and that releases cholesterol because it's really a Vaseline type substance that deals with that. And toxins come along and they harden the cholesterol, and that's the beginning of the plaque buildup process. When plaque builds up, you have less sheer blood flow because it's like kinking the hose there. So I would say that having elevated calcium scores is representative of having that 6G. I would also look at the other ways that your body is detoxifying to see if you can actually kind of support those areas, because the theme is detoxification and keeping your inflammation low. If you want a coaching call with me, again, I can go ahead and help you with that. But in this format, I'm not allowed to give a heck of a lot of advice beyond that. But yes, it's extremely important that you support the suboptimal pathway. No doubt about it. Okay, Kathy has a question. It says, I have done 7 marathons. Wow, I'm tired just hearing that. And my training generally went well, but during that actual event around mile 23 to 24, my muscles would cramp. Is it a possibility that I do not clear well? Looking at gene results for NOS3, I am GT, which is suboptimal. And it says you should approach cardiovascular exercise carefully. She did her last one in October and thinks I better pay attention to my DNA report. I do not want to age myself any faster than I should. And she thanks us for the good information. Yeah, what do you think about that one? She's done a heck of a lot of running in her life, and she may not be clearing toxins well or dilating blood vessels properly.
Yeah, I also want to know how did that day look for you? Did you sleep well the night before? Did you um fuel your body like you needed to get through the race? When did the cramp happen? Were you low in electrolytes? Were you to me there's a lot of little things. I give you praise. Like 7 marathons, yeah. You are that's incredible and so impressive. Um how she should approach cardiovascular exercise. Man, sounds like you're killing it. If you've done 7 marathons, you know what you're doing. I would look more at um how did you get to that point? What did your training look like? What did your sleep habits look like? Um that's a coaching side of me. Justin, I'm sure you have different thoughts.
Yeah, I think that you should absolutely pay attention to your DNA report. It's just that there's a lot more genes of relevance than just the nitric oxide consideration there. So I would want to have a good, robust look at everything going on and contributors to inflammation and free radical clearance and stuff like that. I think that's your best bet, is to really use the whole report. And I don't recommend going too far into just one gene or another. So I think that's your best bet. But I mean, congratulations for having the mental toughness to do what you've done. You're obviously tough as nails. And if you want some supportive strategies, you know where to reach out to as well. So Ingrid has a question. Just trying to clarify a little bit about what I was talking about with that hormone pathway. So saying, was I mentioning progesterone or pregnenolone? And do these genes indicate if we are candidates for DHEA supplementation? So I would say that, I was talking about progesterone, right? So that's the pathway that we look at because it's got pretty heavy genetic considerations there. DHEA is a little bit harder to pinpoint with regard to genes because there's a thing called the cortisol to DHEA ratio, and cortisol will directly lower DHEA regardless of genetic presentation. So it's a little bit harder to pinpoint. DHEA would be another precursor to androgens and estrogens as well. So it's an important thing to pay attention to, but it is a different pathway there. So I would say that knowing this steroid hormone pathway is really important because pregnenolone does convert to progesterone. So that's actually even more up in the rapids than the progesterone that we look at. We start at progesterone because it really nicely tells the story specifically of what that pathway steers towards with regard to dominance. So DHEA supplementation is definitely can be valuable, but I would say you want to have a good, robust look at all of the different downstream metabolites of estrogen, testosterone, etc. Your reports, by the way, can be shared with any of your prescribing clinicians. So if you do have somebody who's going to be offering you hormone replacement therapy, you may want to give them a look at that so they understand that if you added in a DHEA, an estradiol, something like that, know what the metabolites are going to contribute to. And we have, doctors that work at the DNA company that are great in that realm as well and do prescribe BHRT. So if you're interested in those services, you can also hit up the captain, the CEO, and the CEO at the DNAcompany.com email is where you can get that information. Okay, so Tatum has a question saying it's directed at myself. Justin, how can someone reach out to work with you on overall health? I love it. CEO at the DNAcompany.com. You will be directed accordingly, and I can't wait to meet you. Okay, so SM has another question here saying, do you help to create an individualized exercise workout program for women based on their genes? Felicia, take it away.
Yes, this is exactly what I do for the DNA company. So I look at your DNA report and I look at all the genes that we talked about tonight. I go over all of them. And with that, depending on what your genes say about you, is how I put together a program, what it looks like, how we're going to work out and how we'll do recovery and how we're going to do off days and how many days a week. I go through the whole thing and set you up a program, and I do it within 12 weeks. And with that, from me, you will get constant daily talking back and forth or texting, and all my workouts will come through you through an app so that we have constant communication. We also will talk Zoom together every 2 weeks. So we will do a check-in. I will also require pictures and measurements. And so I'm going to put you on the path to what it's going to look like and how you're going to see results. So it's very detailed. You and I will become very, very good friends. And I am your biggest cheerleader to help you get to where you want to be. But yes, the structure, I'm not just going to be like, okay, we're going to do this and this. No, I will look at your genes because that's the blueprint of you. That's what's going to tell me how you work and how you function and how you do starches and how you recover. So if you have any questions you want to know, yes, reach out to me, Felicia.Bruno at the DNAcompany.com. I'm here to help you with anything.
Beautiful. Okay, so Joanna has a question Do you have any thoughts on using EMS suits for working out? So, if you're unfamiliar, an EMS suit would be like an electrical muscle stimulation suit. I think that there's some benefits there as far as like, injury rehabilitation. If you have like difficulty with the mind muscle connection and you can't quite get to certain muscle groups, it kind of overrides your own efforts. It makes it so that you can stimulate that muscle without having to consciously do it. There's some benefits as far as like the time restrictions some people have, because you can do that in like 15, 20 minutes and utilize it. I've used different like tens units and things like that. And yeah, there's certainly some benefit there, but there is also some limitations. You're not going to get the bone density benefits. I don't think you're going to get the same hormone pulse as if you go old school and load up a barbell and put it on your back. You're not going to get the same postural benefits. So, what I would say is that can operate as a tool that can be a good supplement and complement some of your other efforts, but I wouldn't do it in the absence of your other efforts unless you're injured or something and there's a reason why you can't actually lift or do calisthenics or something that's really a little bit more primal. For me, I wouldn't say that it's going to replace real training. I just don't think that it's got the capacity to do that. But you can do it to really isolate a lagging muscle group as well, right? Like let's say you just have really weak calves or something like that and you have trouble training them. Well, you can add that into your robust training program and get that little bit of extra stimulus as well, which is great. Any thoughts on that, Felicia? EMS suits?
Yeah, I think they're a very it's unique thing approach. I'm not against it. I'm I'm with Justin. I would rather do it without just the weights. But I also recommend that, when you're lifting muscle to mind, like if you're doing biceps, think about the actual bicep working. Actually think about it. And that's with any body part. Again, I'm not against the MS. Um, they're unique, but I think free weights are the way to go. I think.
Yeah, and again, you can just complement it with a little electrical muscle stimulation, and you'll be doing pretty good there. We're down to the last couple of questions here. Naomi has a question: what is best for training with small fiber neuropathy? Now, I again have to make the disclaimer here that I'm not a doctor, nor am I your doctor, so I can't prescribe specific treatments for actual conditions. But in general, small fiber neuropathy, it really affects these pain fibers and the autonomic fibers. So you get this heat sensitivity and fatigue and tingling sensations and things like that. So a general outline here would be more lower impact stuff, lower intensity, quicker sessions. You're going to want to make sure that you're taking the right amount of recovery time and keeping inflammation low. Those kinds of things, because you can definitely overdo it pretty quickly. I recommend a session for you with any of our doctors because, again, I'm a little limited in the language I'm able to use on a webinar for that. But take advantage of your genes. Don't overtrain. And I would say start a little bit lighter. Tools like resistance bands are great because you don't have a lot of impact and different things going on there. So use the tools that will work best for you. The last question, and look at how beautifully we timed that. We're right up at the end of the webinar. Marianne says, can you post the genes with the invitation so that we can prep? I'm not entirely sure what you're asking for there, but I will say that all the genes that we mentioned, I did go over all of the alleles, and you can just bounce it back and forth with your reports, and that way you have all of that in there. Maybe she's referencing prior to the webinar, the emails that go out. And that's something that we can note and have the team in the background provide the genes in the emails, perhaps, so that you can prep a little bit more. I'm guessing that's what you mean, Marianne, and I hope so.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting from that question. Maybe post the genes that we're gonna talk about. Is that so
Yeah.
that she could be prepared, or he or they could be prepared on what we're gonna talk about, so they're ready. They can pull
Yeah.
up their own genes, and that's makes sense.
Yeah, Marianne confirmed that in the chat just now, so we'll make a note of that, Marianne, for the team, that when we make the emails that go out talking about the webinars, we can pull up perhaps the ones that are relevant for the session night by night. And with that, Felicia, we made it to the end. I hope you guys learned a little something tonight, folks. Put a little something, a little love in the chat if you learned something. And Felicia, it's been a while since we've done one of these. I hope we have a lot more in the future.
It has been, Justin, but it was so much fun. I enjoy every time we get together, and it's so informative. And I feel like we learn a lot. I even learn too. That's what's fun.
Good. All right. Well, thanks so much, folks. That's the end of the New Year, New You series. And we are going into February. So now it's just time to get to work. We don't need to talk about New Year's anymore. It's over. And it's time to just put the nose to the grindstone and get some results. So thank you all for showing up tonight. And thanks, Felicia. It's been a blast.
Thank you. We'll see y'all later.
Have a good
Bye.
night, everybody.
Bye.